optimized Genesis sequence.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see everybody of you here. Welcome to my talk, where I'll be discussing the new kind of architecting, the modern architect. It was about 20 years ago I did my first assignment for a client. I was a Java developer, and I got this big stack of papers. It had everything. The architecture, it was written down to the nail. Everything was specified. Everything was done, clear, perfect. And I got the job just, build it. And as soon as I started building, I ran into all kinds of issues, but no one to talk to actually get to the point of a new architecture, a new way of changing this, what we had agreed upon at the start of the project. Later on in my career, I came in these situations more and more. Somewhere along 10 years ago, it's changed, it's shifted, and that I want to talk to you about. I'm Marcel Schutte, lead solution architect at Asoh. We're based in the Netherlands, and I work for clients mainly in finance and government. Both are very. They used to be very rigid in architecture. But I hope to show you that it can be in a different way. It's a lunch talk, so enjoy your meal. It's not often that one of my talks is accompanied by lunch, so this is a great new thing for me. So enjoy your lunch, and I hope you like what you hear. Let's start out with the introduction. Like I said before, a long time ago, we had these architects in ivory towers creating these big documents with everything perfect. It was a big design up front. Not a whole lot of changes could be made in the following iteration. In the following waterfall, actually. Those architects were very detached from everyday development life. They were up in their own space, creating their specifications and creating the perfect end product. In the years that followed, some cracks started to show. We had new technologies emerge, making it necessary for architects to adapt to this new process. The market demanded different. The demands from the market were different. They wanted faster release cycles, not just we start a project at point 1 in time and we end up 18 months later with a product. No, they wanted value earlier on in the project. But they also wanted greater adaptability. They wanted to change things in the course of your in the course of the project. And the last one, perfect was no longer good enough. No, it changed from perfect is not longer good enough to good enough is the new perfect. You made sure you had enough architecture to start the project, and make sure that in following iterations you could change your architecture. Moving on a little bit, a couple of years, rise of agile, more and more projects were being done with agile, and whether it's Scrum, RUP very early on, DevOps now, it changed the way we had to do architecture. And also new architectural styles helped speed this process up. Continuous delivery, DevOps, those things entered our work domain, and with that, the definition of a software architect evolved. An architect is now way more a guide and a facilitator. You give your team we've seen the guardrails before. Don't take the high guardrails, but you give them some guardrails, and you help them make the right decisions, the right way forward with your application, your project. And with this, you get tools and practice to help you with this whole process. And in the end, we end up, what I hope, for every project, to end up with a resilient and adaptable architecture. This last one is in the end the best way to ensure the value for the client, for all the other stakeholders as well. You get way more involved as a leader in shaping your architectural vision, but also leading everyone to that vision you have in the way you want the project to evolve. But it's always a balance between stability and evolvability. You want to make sure change is possible, but you don't want to break everything every time. You have, like I said, some guardrails, but you make sure that there is a possibility for innovation, for new features, basically. All right. Understanding the business goals, technical constraints, and evolved software. In the end, that's what we have to do as an architect. You have to understand what actually the business goal is and how we can achieve what exactly is needed. Still, other parts of the job, because it's not longer isolated in the tower, free from all business, free from all development teams. You have to know your organizational structures, your communication patterns, business drivers. You are the change agent, basically. You are the one that's guarding your architecture, but also making it possible for the development teams to add features and add functionality soon on, and start with those. Connecting the technical with the strategical, because you are the one that actually bridges the gap between the business stakeholders and the development teams. You are the one in between that has to translate back and forth. You also have to translate the questions from the development teams, but also the needs and the wishes from the business. Now, before I move on, this was a short timeline of what happened in the past, let's say 20 years. Let's see what this modern architect, what the characteristics of that architect are. Let's move on. Quick recap of the last part. From really isolated to collaborative and pragmatic approach to software architecture, and in the guide and facilitator. Maybe now already, but it will keep growing this in the future. As a software architect, you have to embrace change. Change is inevitable. Change is, well, I've heard this in many ways before in the past years. Change is the constant. We are all subject to change. Our projects are subject to change. It's inevitable. You are constantly dealing with change, so you better get used to it and embrace it. What you do as an architect is you create a framework within where your teams can grow, learn, and experiment with all kinds of new technologies that still fit within your architectural vision. You make sure they have the tools to actually build the thing that's corresponding to your vision. And the Fitness functions in this case are some metrics about scalability, all those kinds of things. You add metrics in place to see if your current solution and the solution that that's created iteratively still adheres to your wishes, your design at the front. Right. Because we are basically the bridge between stakeholders and development teams, communication is of the utmost importance. You have to be able to communicate between those various stakeholders. Like I said, engage with developers, business stakeholders, and also the other architects. Because you're not working in isolation anymore. You have to deal with your entire business. And some clients have maybe 20, 50 architects all doing this, and they still have to make sure there's some continuity, some uniformity within the company. And later on, we're going to see some tools I like to use for this. Very basic tools, but they give a very good approach to how you can make this possible. This is I've talked about this a little bit early on. You always have to have a balance between what's desired from the stakeholders and actually that's something that's possible in reality. Because, anybody heard any crazy ideas from the business that they wanted to do and they just knew they couldn't do that in the software? Anybody? No? Seriously? Wow. I want to work. I want to work where you work. Cool. Okay. But in the end, because this balance is so important, you are able to, and you will be able to make elegant solutions that are also practical and maintainable. But in the end, most important, it has to deliver value for your client. You can't just build the nicest thing. You also have to make sure it adds value for the client or your direct employer, or and that's the ultimate goal. Make sure your business becomes a success with the software you need, with the projects you're doing. Like I said, change is the constant. That's we've talked about this before, but it's so ingrained in our entire day-to-day job that you have to stay current with all the changes, all the new and exciting techniques, but also the new architectural styles. You have to keep learning, and someone who isn't willing to invest in themselves are gonna get behind, and someday just only create solutions that just aren't fitting the problem you're trying to solve. Now, as I said, continuous learning, but it also means reassessing your, reevaluating your assumptions. Everybody has assumptions. I'm not going to go very much into assumptions, but trust me, make sure you reevaluate them on a regular basis, because things change. Things that were impossible, a year ago, are now very much possible. We've seen that in the keynote earlier today. Since the generative AI became a thing, the whole playing field opened up with all new kinds of possibilities. And you can't just ignore those changes. You need those in the future. Mistakes. I've always said making mistakes isn't a bad thing. Not learning from them is. Make sure if you have a mistake, learn from it. But also make sure everybody else, not everybody else, but a lot of people, I've made a couple of years ago. I made a mistake at a company. Well, stupid mistake. Can happen. I've owned up. I said it was my fault, my mistake, and here's what I did, how it happened. Here's how I managed to overcome all the problems that came from it. And this is how we're going to do this in the future to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that, I think, is a really important part of your day-to-day job. It's not only for architects, developers. I think it goes for everybody in the technical field, actually. And by doing all of this, I think we can be the most adapted to the ever-changing digital landscape, because it keeps changing, and you have to change with it. Now, let's have a look at some of the skills needed to be this new modern architect. All right, the skill set. Once again, back in the old times, you had the only thing you had to do was be able to type and draw boxes and lines. That's basically it. You didn't have to communicate. You didn't have to consider any other opinions, other ideas. Now you could just create your own solution and throw it down the ivory tower and see what in 12 months, 18 months was finished. So the roles of an architect changed. You have to be a communicator, a collaborator, negotiator, leader. All those things require different skills, different tools. We'll see those later on. But that's still essential to do your job well and make sure the end product is the best way to actually do this. Talked about this a little bit. Bridge the gap between the technical and business worlds. You do this by communicating a lot, and I mean actually a lot. 2 years ago, I was at a client implementing an API strategy, and for the first 2-3 months, I think all I did was talk to the different development teams and make sure everybody was on the same page, because that's how you make sure it will be adopted to the thing you are willing to implement. And in this case, by actually talking to everyone, the end result actually became a lot better, because otherwise I would have just done what I think was best and completely ignored all the good ideas that are in all of the teams. In that way, you miss a whole lot of value. But with that, clear, concise communication is essential. You have to make sure you can communicate what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it. I usually use visual aids for this, diagrams, stuff like that, real-world examples, and most importantly, especially when talking to the business, is jargon-free explanations. I know, well, I used to be a developer as well, and if I had to explain something to anybody, it took me 2 words to have my first jargon in my explanation, because it's so easy to go, because it's we're running on Kubernetes, for instance. From business, they don't care. They just want to know it runs. So you can leave that out. Make sure you make it jargon-free. After all that communication, the active listening is also on here as well. You still have to make sure you get a solution that is optimal for all stakeholders. You can't just create a solution for one of your stakeholders. No, every stakeholder has to be on board with your solution. But that means you also have to mediate between those. stakeholders, and to make sure you actually listen to all of them and make sure they feel heard. Because as soon as you don't do that, there's going to be people aren't going to be happy. Let's say it like that. And by that listening, you can identify shared goals and make sure you can pave the way to get to those goals. And in the end, we still have to balance those things, because you can build everything they want, and well, sometimes, but mostly they have unrealistic expectations from those software, what software can do. After all of that, after we've done all of that, and we have a vision where we want to take our product, our complete architecture for our company, or whatever small part it is, as an architect, you are responsible to create, to make sure this architecture is done within the guidelines you set up, and make sure you go the right way. In this, you once again clearly communicate, and most importantly is that you tell everybody why. Why are you doing this? Why are you going this way? Why are you? Why did you decide we have to do this? And within that, you also you give your teams the opportunity to actually experiment with new technologies, because a whole lot of new technologies can still adhere to the architecture that was done before. So if you do it like that, it creates it creates a great atmosphere between the teams and between the architect, and just to make sure you get the best end product that you're looking for. Well, we've set the framework. We're up and running. What you need to do now is increment on what you are doing. It's evolutionary design. You make, as I said before, we're not looking for perfect. We're looking for good enough to start. And after every good enough, there's an increment, and you add more functionality. You add more. You make sure that your architecture grows, evolves with the changes you need to make for the different systems. And by that, if you make sure that you get those adaptable systems that create more value and are more easily adjusted and adapted, and where features are added. Few ways to do that. Well, modularity, loose coupling, well-defined interfaces. That's just the technical implementation of that, but you have to make sure you are able to create those changes. Power story there. In the end, this has to do with tell everybody why you're doing something. By using storytelling, by using those narratives, I tried some of them in this talk, just some war stories about my experiences at different clients. You can use all kinds of things to get your why across. Why do you want something to be done that way? I like the success stories, but I like the failure stories more, because that's where the learning is. Success story is just one way of how it could successfully finish the whole project, and that solution might not work for you in the different situation. So you really need to make sure you understand why something failed or succeeded, and that way you can communicate why you want to do something like that again. Adaptive decision making. All right. because we're working in increments and with added functionality and added features along the way, at any time you create you add something to the architecture, you do this on incomplete information because you don't know what you don't know, but you have to deal with the information you have at that point. And with that, you just evaluate your options. You check, see what's the best way to go forward, and like that. And for me, a good way of actually recording this, and also the things we see before with make sure you get across why you do something. I really like architectural design records. We're going to have a short look at those later on. And once again, experimentation and learning, not only for the teams, but also for me. I experiment also with change. Because you work in an iterative way, you can easily experiment with your architecture. If we do this, does it add value? If it doesn't, well, you just undo it in the next sprint. Don't do this in a very big way, but you get small things in there, and it works perfectly. Now, after we've seen all this, I want to have a look at a few of the tools I really like to use, just to do my day-to-day job and to make sure everyone understands what I'm working on, what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to create. It's in the tools. Toolkit of the architect. It's very diverse. We're going to have there are software methodologies and frameworks, ADRs, fitness function diagramming tools, and we're going to have a quick look at the last bullet point: ADRs, fitness function diagramming tools. In the basis, this is what I use to communicate my vision, my architecture to the teams, to the business, to the stakeholders, and so forth. I've talked about ADRs before. I've named them a few times. It's an architect decision record. By making every change you make to the architecture, you document a few standard steps, basically. What's the context this decision is made in? What is the change? What were the other options? And also, why were those options not further used in the architecture? And you can do that in all kinds of ways. You can take, for instance, you can take a Word document, but what I like to do is put it in a Markdown file and save it close to where actually the project is built. So I usually put it in the same repo. Because it's Markdown, you can easily have it version controlled. You can see the changes. You can see at what time they were made. And it makes it really easy for everybody on the team to actually notice why something was done. And every time you take another step in your architecture, you create something new, you add an ADR, or you choose to actually delete an ADR, just to make sure that we've rolled back. Let's see what we're going to do now. So those were the ADRs. Let's have a quick look at fitness functions. These are basically metrics on which I put my architecture. It's metrics on scalability, metrics on security, metrics on... and during the life cycle of your architecture and the project that's being built, the only thing those metrics are allowed to do is become better. As soon as they start getting worse, you have to change the way you look at your architecture and how you're going to change this. And a different way you can do this is Anybody has ever used the arg unit? Yeah, some fingers, very little. You can use that. There's some kind. They're somewhat like a unit test, but for your software architecture in your project. You can put in constraints. You can tell it if it's a monolith, it's a hexagonal architecture, all those kinds of things. And in the end, those unit tests are just run when all the other unit tests are run, and they check to see if your project still adheres to all your previous set architecture values. And in that way, we can do that. Then we come to actually documenting and selling my architecture to business and development teams. I use C4 for this. C4 creates very clear and concise diagrams with just enough information for the person you're talking to. It has 4 different levels of abstractions, which makes it possible to create a diagram from the model to talk to the upper level of management. Just the basic context of your application. You just that's enough information if you're going to talk at that level. If the farther down you get in those levels of abstractions, the more details it gets, and the more technical it gets. So less technical at the C1 level, and the most technical at C4. I really this is a really fine way of communicating your whole architecture. I've added a tool to this. You can create C4 diagrams with all kinds of tools. You can do it with Blend UML, Vision, or I think Draw.io. I think, but I like to use Structurizer from the same. It's also created by the person who created the C4 model, which makes it a text-based diagramming modeling tool. I use Structurizer. This makes it easier to actually see the changes you make to your architecture, because you can put it once again in your version control. I put it close to my ADRs and the application code, so we always know what version of architecture we were creating when the code was developed. But this also, at this point, it's not only my responsibility to keep the architecture diagrams up to date. We can also request this from the development team. If something changes, if there's something added in the diagram, and you can in the end you can also put it in your pipeline that it actually creates those diagrams from the text-based once every time you, for instance, run a new version of your application, for instance. Well, all those things, I think, is the new architect. I like to call it the pragmatic architect. Let's have a quick recap of what we talked about. It's the bridge builder. You are the one in between the business and the development teams. And it's not only code and lines and boxes anymore. It's not you in a silo doing everything you want for the architect and then just throwing it down from that ivory tower. And after you've actually created your architecture while talking to all of the teams, you make sure that during the project, everybody's going the same way, everybody's going to the same vision. And I like to use storytelling to make this a success. Just a little recap of the last part. Document decisions. With the ADRs, with the diagrams, make sure it is known why you do what you do. make sure the team knows what you're doing and where you want to go with your whole project. And by this, by visualizing this complexity by these changes, it creates agile documentation. Documentation that is not only created by me and then never read again, but also documentation that it gets easily updated, easily changed when the underlying code changes. Thank you. I hope you liked it. Here are my contacts if you want to contact, go ahead. The QR code is a link to my to a GitHub repo with previous talks and also the slides from this talk. And well, if you have questions, I'll be here and I'll be walking around. Oh, don't forget, rate and in a matter of always learning, continuous learning. I really like your feedback. What's good? What's bad? What should be better? Just let me hear it. Okay. Thanks.